Welcome to another podcast episode of Clicking Buttons with our guest Kevin Rabichow. He is an online poker crusher who has amassed more than $1 million of profit in online games, over 2 million hands played, and he's constantly battling in some of the toughest online heads-up cash games for the past decade. Welcome, Kevin, to the podcast. How's it going today?
Thanks. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Good. Excited to have you on. We've worked together once before. I was reminiscing about the Doug Polk and Daniel Negreanu battle heads up we casted together.
Yeah.
I think that's the last time we spoke, but what have you been up to since then?
Yeah, I guess that would have been, I get these years mixed up, like late 2020, early 2021, I suppose. It was pretty, like while I was still primarily online for like the remainder of 2021, I was pretty busy with different coaching projects. Shortly after the Doug Polk match was, I guess, the equally publicized Landon Tice Bill Perkins match that didn't
All right.
end up completing.
Let me stop you right there before we get forward. But
yeah,
I do want to get your history of some online poker before we get into the further online heads up poker matches.
sure.
So let's backtrack to when you first got into online poker.
Okay.
How did that happen? Give me the story about what enticed you to get into online poker and what you initially kind of were playing it for.
Yeah, so I grew up in Chicago. I was playing pre Black Friday, so I would have gotten, I don't know, seriously started into online poker when I was 18. That was 2007. But I played a little bit before then, not any real money or not any seriously competitive games. But I was probably interested in the game like 2005. Started learning strategy in maybe 2006, 2007, and then when I went to college in Chicago, I don't know, I committed quite a lot of time to learning the game and playing the game while I was in school. And I found Heads Up specifically around 2009, 2010. And that was my main game up until Black Friday. When that hit, I did my first World Series of Poker in Las Vegas, lost a ton of money, and then brought what was left to Canada, which is where I still live now. So I moved up to Canada because of Black Friday,
Okay.
and I
So
played
originally you're
online.
American?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh, so I was playing online, I guess, full time for the first time in Canada after having played, kind of part time but pretty seriously from the U.S. pre Black Friday.
Okay. And it was mostly online pre-Black Friday?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I was just like I turned 21 that year, or I guess when would that have had to be? I guess I would have turned 21 in 2010, and then in 2011 I played my first World Series. That was the same year that I moved to Canada, like around August, right after.
Okay.
And I just played online full time from 2011 until call it 2018, 2019.
Oh wow.
Sometime around then I started to get into live poker more seriously and mix the two of them together.
Okay. So you would say you were primarily an online player for that period of 2005 till all the way to 2018?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay. Was there something that started you into online poker? Maybe you had a friend that played first, or you saw some kind of TV advertisement on Full Tilt Poker or something. What was the way that you got
Yeah,
into it initially?
I have. Yeah, I remember a friend in high school. His name was Dan. We don't really keep in touch, but he was into online poker before me, before any of my close friends. Uh, he would like. He was the only person I can remember playing during high school.
Yeah,
So like bringing a laptop to class or like bringing a laptop to lunch or whatever, and playing online poker every now
classic.
and then. And at one point, I remember him playing 50 cents a dollar Heads Up and thinking it was like the biggest game I've ever, like, just insane money. Um, and the impact there, I guess, um, was that I had an affinity for heads up games. Like I don't know that him playing in that environment was like, oh my god, online poker in general, but because there were some other things like I played what was it, Doyle's Room, or one of those old sites had like free money play. And my other friend Andrew told me about these free money games that you could play and you could accumulate points. And we were like desperately trying to cash out these points that were worthless.
Right.
Um, but fighting hard to to earn them, obviously.
Yeah.
So there was a whole lot of that. I mean, it like around that time, I feel like almost every boy or young guy was involved in poker somehow, or like was thinking about it, and that just seemed to be the situation. Like once I went to college, almost all my friends either wanted to play a home game or were playing online, or were interested in the fact that me and my roommate and actually our other, like this guy who was a year older than us, Bill, who already lived on the floor in the dorm, like he was playing limit hold'em full time or like semi full time. There was just a lot of online poker around me in my friend group
Yeah.
around ages 16 to 18.
Yeah. I think that's kind of when you first get exposed to it. I think we all have a Dan in our lives if we grew up, during
Yeah,
the online poker boom where you had one person who was just dedicated and then they just exposed all of their friends and then some latched on and others were like, what is this? You,
yeah,
what am I, is this real money? You know? And
yeah.
then they just don't get that interested. For me, I think my chat knows that Grimstar was the guy, uh,
Mm,
was the friend who got really into online poker and exposed me, and then was also a heads up player as well. So maybe there's something about those stands of the world that are just, heads up poker,
yeah,
grinding at lunchtime with the lunch money. That'd be a good
yeah,
image.
yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you got into mainly heads up poker right away. Was that kind of what you stuck with, or?
Like that's the game that I remember dedicating the most effort to. I at some point was playing like 45 man sit and goes. I at some point was playing like micro stakes, six max cash, but I don't. And maybe micro six max cash was the game that I took the most seriously before heads up. But it seemed like once I had enough money to be playing heads up, that's just what I wanted to play. I
Right,
think the only reason I wasn't playing that right away was because I had like a $200 bankroll and the smallest game was 50 NL. So I just didn't play that game at first. But once I had actually I distinctly remember min cashing like the full tilt Sunday major. I guess it would have been a $500 or $600 buy-in,
oh wow.
and a min cash was like, I don't know, $800, $900, something like that. And with my like $200 bankroll, I had satellited into this tournament and then was like stalling as much as I could to min cash this thing, because min cashing was like 5xing my bankroll. And there was a full tilt pro at the table. I want to say Lee Watkinson, if I'm remembering the name correctly,
That sounds like a
and
pro name, yeah.
someone from like 2005, yeah.
Yeah.
And he noticed, I guess I forget if I typed in the chat or what, but he noticed that I was trying to stall, and like as being like a good guy at my table on the bubble of this huge tournament, he like burned 180 seconds of time bank for no reason, just to get
Wow.
me a better chance of min cashing.
What a good
That
guy,
was
Greg.
huge.
That's
Yeah,
nice.
serious good guy, Red Pro.
Yeah.
Um, so that was probably like, I don't remember the timeline perfectly, but the way it exists in my memory is that I was playing like micro stakes before that. Then I boosted my bankroll. Then I started playing 50 and L heads up. That's the way I'd like to remember it, anyways.
Right, right. There's often that kind of like aha moments or catapulting of like something gets you into that top echelon, even if it's just going from 0 to 50 NL, right? Like it's kind of the start.
Yeah.
So it's cool to hear like that's where your start maybe derived from.
Hmm.
So let's talk about a little more. What did you want to get out of online poker? Was it like just a pipe dream to make a lot of money, or did you really like the strategy of it? What were you trying to get out of playing it?
It's a good question. I remember not really giving this much thought in like I don't know how many years. Like in the first, let's call it 5 years of me playing or something, that wasn't really important to me. It was just what I did.
Right.
Um, I think looking back on those years, what was interesting to me was the strategy, but also to some extent the community of exchanging strategy or like building on strategy. Um, like 2+2 forums were a huge draw for me. I might have spent like people now talk about how much time should you spend studying versus playing. Like back then I was probably 50-50 2+2 playing.
Right.
uh, Whereas, now I might even spend less than that proportion studying. So it yeah, it strikes me that during those years I was more heavily invested, I think, in the community of like learning about poker than I was in the actual playing of poker online. So I think, and that's unique to it being an online game, that there was an online community of people discussing how to be good at it. So that was certainly um, the motivator in hindsight. Although at the time I was just in it, like that was my world. So that's where I wanted to spend my time. I didn't really give it much thought. I just woke up and logged on.
Right. And I think, yeah, it's definitely natural to be more interested in something when you're first starting out getting into things. I remember me too. I was in 2+2 constantly on the forums, and it was exciting. It was new. It was fresh. Online poker was kind of booming. This was
Mhm.
like one of the few resources everyone congregated to, and there weren't a lot of solid proven resources like we have now with solvers and all these
Yep.
training sites and everything like that. So it was kind of like if you ask enough questions you might get enough answers to be good, right?
Right.
And if you practiced all of what you saw on the forums and discussions, then you became a better player. So I think naturally
Yeah.
that was just kind of where everyone went in online poker to get better. And it was nice. It was a big community. Poker was booming. People were friendly. Uh,
Mhm.
I feel like back then, people were way more interested in sharing information because, in some ways, sharing information and being kind of an authority on 2+2 had some prestige in its own right. I think like if you shared some
That's
like really
interesting.
good posts, you would be kind of praised like, oh yeah, that's Phil Galfond, he's the best in the world. Like whatever he
Mhm.
says on this forum, we're going to listen to and we're going to follow. So kind of there was some kind of benefit back then, I think, to sharing some information with others to kind of get that status in the community, to kind of be
Mhm.
like that figure. Um, would you agree with that, or do you think there was maybe a different kind of reason why people were more willing to share things and talk strategy with others?
I mean, I definitely think that had an impact. It it was sort of organic though, right? Like you could try now to recreate the same community where you gain notoriety or points or whatever by saying the right stuff, and people still would be protective of their information. I think
Right.
I think at the time it was just the fact that it was this emerging game, and even though there were like winners and losers, it hadn't yet reached the point where people had like the scarcity mindset around it.
Right.
I think they were very much um, I don't know if euphoric is the right word, but like everyone who did the right things was winning money, and like you didn't that didn't get slowed down by the fact that you gave your secrets away, right?
Yeah.
Um, there were probably a handful of people who were more protective of their information than others, but it was yeah, I think it was just kind of a better environment, a better ecosystem. There was no yeah, there wasn't that concern about like, oh, I can't help other people get better at this thing. And that definitely like two I mean 2+2 is in my mind long gone.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I
the
think
the
that
the, old, the golden ages of it anyway.
yeah, I think that the scarcity mindset started to pick up like as early as, I don't know, 12 years ago, like 13 years ago, right? I mean, I think the quality of discussion on the forum like gradually declined. Maybe not in absolute terms. Like maybe the answers you were getting continued to get better because people were getting better on average. Um, but the level of player who was willing to share was dropping.
Right.
um, because they were starting to see like their economy shrink, right, or their opportunities close. So it was more like, oh, I have to focus on me and I'm playing, and I can't just give away free info, or I want to monetize the fact that I'm, you know, that I'm sharing valuable information, because now the long run has really played out, and all these kids who maybe felt like, oh, I just got a windfall of cash because people are terrible at this game. Um, Now they're actually thinking of it like a job. They're thinking of
Right.
it like, okay, I can make this much money per year if I sell my information at this price. I'm getting a fair return for the value of that information. Like, I don't think anyone was thinking about that in 2006. You know?
Right. Well, I think I'm going to take a minute to praise you because I've noticed a lot that you've been willing to share over the years, a lot of strategy, a lot of talk, a lot of, most recently I've seen you posting like Twitter posts of hand histories and going in depth about them. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a really rare thing now. So thank you for being open and sharing because as a poker enthusiast myself, I always enjoy when I get to see other successful players, their mindset, their strategies, their understanding of the game. It kind of motivates me, to continue grinding and to keep pushing like that. So I think that you and I have a similar mindset in the way of sharing information. What is it? What is it that motivates you to kind of share with others in that way?
Yeah, I mean, first, thanks for calling that out. It's I appreciate that. I think um, I don't know. I've always been a little uh, not perplexed. Like, I think I understand the mindset, but there's always been this sort of disconnect for me from the idea that um, that sharing information is bad for me personally, or that making the games tougher is something I'm trying to avoid. Um, I think perhaps, I mean, the more I've gotten into coaching, the more involved I've gotten into like more, I guess, formal methods of exchanging information. The more I've taken on the mindset that like pushing the game forward is good, and I think that like on the whole, I'm someone who like I'm not afraid of the game getting tougher. I actually appreciate the opportunity to like be part of the game and watch it get tougher. You know, I think there's a I don't know. Um, there's a part of the community which I'm sure is a big part who's concerned about their bottom line disappearing. Um, and maybe I'm just like a stupid optimist, but that just doesn't frighten me, right? Like that's not in the back of my mind thinking like, oh my god, if I reveal this information,
Right.
my job's going to be lost. I just I like the exchange of information. I enjoy like high level strategy. I enjoy getting better at something. I don't want to get to this point in poker where I'm just like, okay, that's good enough. Like, let's try and you know collect as much money as possible. That's just not really why I'm here.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if your motivations feel similar, but to me, like high level strategy is exciting, and if that's going to make the games tougher, then great. Like, let's make the games tougher and let's battle in tougher games over time. That's I don't think that's something that one person can stop from happening. So I have no interest in trying.
Yeah, and that's coming from a player who's primarily playing heads up, one of the most cutthroat forms of poker you could possibly play, right? So I think,
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, like heads up, I don't know that I would say that it's my like primary form now, just because like the environment of I don't know if just like the interest in playing heads up has declined over the years, or if it's the fact that it's like the easiest game to cheat in online. um, but it's not a game that I like rely on for income anymore. But I do think that uh, I have no problem discussing strategy of the game that I'm playing right now. You know, like I when I started playing tournaments more, I immediately switched my content on Run It Once to tournament play, because that's just that's what I'm working on. That's what I'm interested in learning about, and that's what I'm playing. So why wouldn't I
right.
make content around that rather than like covering? I could just cover heads up from 7 years ago and just like recycle that material as long as it works. But I again, that's just not what I'm interested in doing. Um, I like the learning process. I like sharing the learning process.
Yeah. So what is the ecosystem like then in Heads Up No Limit Hold'em these days? Can you log on a poker site and battle anybody? Is there, period of 5 hours that you're sitting alone at the table? What's the ecosystem like?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, if I'm being honest, like I haven't open sat myself in quite some time. I have old students. I have friends who still do. I could speak to my understanding of what they're doing, and I believe it's largely unchanged from what it was, let's say, 4 years ago. So Stars has this Zoom format that um, creates the ecosystem where somebody is gonna get the game going. Like if two players join and they want to play each other, the game starts and then anyone can join. Very much like the direction Six Max has gone. And I thought that was good, and I think that remains good. It's just lower volume than it used to be. Like there's just not as many people logging on and playing that format anymore.
Right.
The other problem is, or I guess the other thing that's changed over time is that the top most competitive regs are often friends or study partners, or maybe
Yeah.
even part of the same stable, or they're maybe even backing the same people or being backed by the same people. So the like jostling for the top spot is not really happening as naturally as it used to. So those big, you know, pro versus pro matches are only happening in the environment we've maybe seen in this like challenge format, right? Where people put down a big side bet,
Right.
they want to make a show of it. Or the Legend Showdown that Run It once did, I thought was fantastic, but again, to be honest, it took a lot of work to organize that. We only got 6 people to play, and it was like, I mean, it was a very tough match, but it's not that much volume, right? Like it's not the kind of thing that you can uh, depend on for income.
Right.
It was just like a cool event that I got to play, and I was lucky to win. Um, but the day to day, I think it's just like it used to be. But regs don't battle as much, and the volume of players coming into it is much lower than it used to be.
Right. So, like, let's say you were to jump back in the heads up streets. How would you go about
Mhm.
getting action? Would you just sit someone that's sitting alone, or would you kind of try and go the Doug Polk route and poke a bunch of different people and try and get someone to respond for action?
I would probably just sit people. Like I think there's still always value in being the person who owns the lobby, right? This is true in Six Max as well, to a lesser extent. I think being the person who's sitting at the table first has inherent value. Um, so I think the logical place to start is just to challenge those people, like challenge the people who are currently the gatekeepers, right?
Right.
Um, I kind of know who they are. I'm not I'm not excited about challenging them, but that's what I would do. I would prepare a lot first, and then I would do that.
Okay. Who would you say is the gatekeeper at Heads Up No Limit Hold'em right now? Do you have an idea of who you
Uh,
would?
Usually, when I look, at least on Stars, which is where the names are the most uh, well known, I still see Button Clicker there most days,
Mhm.
maybe almost every day. Uh, I know that he's not the only one there, but I think that like if he's online, he gets to sit.
Right.
Um, the GG cash game ecosystem, I'm a little less familiar with. I know they don't have heads up tables specifically, but I do think that heads up happens sometimes on GG. And I've seen at the real name tables, uh, some rotation of people like Limitless, people like Make Boyfriend, um, people like what's his name, um, Six Max player who plays a lot of heads up. Uh, I don't think Antoha is the person
Stefan?
I'm thinking of, but it's
Maybe
Stefan
Stefan?
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of them, and someone else is escaping my memory. But like the people who play like the 200, 400, Six Max when it happens, a good chunk of them are also very good at heads up.
Right.
They kind of have to be, like they have to be prepared to play heads up or three handed. So I think that they probably get the most volume in. But I still think that for heads up specifically, um, button clicker is the most proficient at heads up only format. Whereas if three handed was part of the equation, he might not be fighting so hard for that. It might be someone like Marcus or Stefan or um,
Right.
Linus, if he was playing. I don't see Linus so much these days.
So would you then say that 6 max is more realistic if you were to get back into like the constant online battling?
I would say yes. I see more action go off there. I see the bigger games happen there. Three-handed is a pretty interesting game and pretty corollary to heads up. I think I would enjoy three-handed a
Really?
lot. Actually, I haven't put that much work into it, but like you play a lot of. Well, maybe this is me after studying tournaments for 3 years, but playing blind versus blind is just like a cool variation on heads up, and then
Yeah,
playing button versus big blind is like a cool variation on heads up. So it like the vast majority of the hands are heads up in some formation,
right.
but the obviously the ranges are different, so the solutions are different, and I would need to prepare because these guys play a lot.
Yeah. I would say the three-handed is very similar to 6 max three-handed.
Mhm.
You have some what is it called? Removal. Um, when you have like I forgot what the term is for it though. When you have some seats that fold before the three-handed, it's less likely
Sure.
that there's, you know what I mean? I
Yes.
can't think of
Yeah.
the name for it right now, but there's that factor. But other than that, I think it's almost, all the theory and all the studying is very applicable. So like
Yeah.
three-handed and 6 max or I do a lot of my studying for 6 max and three-handed.
Mhm.
So I think that it's exciting to play three-handed. You just got to find two players that also think that they have an edge as well. And then also not
Yeah.
have a fourth and fifth come or sixth, which
Yeah.
is tricky. But it is, yeah, I think that's probably the most heads up scenarios you'll get to practice for, um,
Yeah.
aside from literally just playing someone heads up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so is there anyone in your career that you've had a tough time playing heads up? Have you had any battles? Have you done any challenges or anything like that yourself?
Um, Formal challenges I have not really done. I was talking to Gazzy B about this last week. How like I feel like my position in heads up has always been like someone who's quite skilled and somewhere near the top of the pack, but never someone who really engages in like the battles that need to occur to claim that you're like the top dog.
Right, right.
That
You're
just
probably the one that
that
makes the most money then. Because
I,
everyone with a,
I
yeah,
I wish that was true. I doubt that's true either. But the point being, like, there wasn't really a period of time in my career where I was like trying to fight for number one. So I didn't get into any like super long battles. The people I battled the most, I think, were the people who had similar approaches to me, which was like trying to position themselves well in the lobby, maybe trying to win the limit, one limit down from whatever like the real best players were interested in.
hmm
So if Doug Polk is battling for everything 25-50 plus, like maybe I'm in the 10-20 lobby trying to be the best 10-20 player. Um, and I think when that was my position, I ended up battling a lot against Mummy Pois, Mummy, whatever. I just called him Mummy. Uh, he was a frequent opponent at 10-20 and really crushed me over over a pretty big sample.
ouch.
Um, there's a Yeah, I don't think that he has played any substantial online volume in the last like 4 or 5 years. I think he ended up moving to the live games in Macau or the live game somewhere, and I'm sure doing quite well because he was really talented. Um, but
How
that
would
was
you
a
know like at that point when to stop playing someone or like do you dig deep and start trying to figure out how to beat like that's one thing I've ever never really understood about heads up is like let's say
yeah
you play someone, you play 3,000 hands, they just absolutely crush you. Like maybe you see some things they're doing wrong that you can exploit or like adjust to or figure out, or maybe you think it's just chalked up to
yeah
variance, but like, how do you make that decision to be like, okay, no, I'm playing this guy until either I go broke or I have all of his money?
yeah I think at the time that I was playing him and like a lot of these other matches, I didn't have a good system for figuring that out. I don't think at the time I was, let's say, mature enough to understand what would make me better than someone or what would make someone else better than me. I think now, after having spent a lot of time coaching, I've started to recognize what to look for. Um, I think it's easier if you're analyzing two other players, for example. Like let's say you were watching, the big heads up match between Stefan and Limitless, right? And you wanted to make it your goal to figure out who is the better player, not based necessarily on results, but just based on like what's happening in the match. Um, the way that you might go about this is you might look at like both of their stats. Like if you had access to that, I'm sure most people don't. Um, but if you could access their stats, you could see what they do differently, like what's different about their approaches. And I think as like a strategist, you could say, okay, well, this person has really high. Let's use a simple example. They have really high flop C bet. Um, and the other player has really low flop check raise. Seems like the player with high flop c bet is winning that part of the battle, right? Like if you look at one-on-one matchups in stats, you might say like, okay, that player who's c betting a lot is not getting punished for doing so. They're
Right.
probably winning this. Um, they're probably playing that node better. Um, you could do that for all the nodes, right? You could look through all the stats and you could say, okay, well, the matchup is being won on the turn by this player, it's being won on the river by that player. And I don't necessarily know that I have a great way to quantify all those little things, but I have a pretty good sense for what's important. Um, and you can
Yeah.
definitely spot when someone has a big edge, right? You could definitely spot like if someone's fold to river c bet is 67 and the other player's river c bet like with bluffs, like you've literally never seen them give up a bluff, then they're doing something right. And that's a big edge. So looking at it this way is my current approach. At the time I didn't really think about it like this. At the time I was just trying to play well, and evaluate on sort of a hand by hand basis, like in the moment, if I thought they were playing well.
Right.
And I think this is very flawed. Like this approach, and I see so many players do this now. I think it's very flawed to just because all you're doing is you're seeing your opponent play a hand differently than you would, and your brain's telling you like that was bad, and that makes them a bad player.
Yeah,
It's just
that's
like
the classic thing that almost every poker player does.
yeah, and it's just so wrong. Like it's completely incorrect. Um, there's so many different ways to play a hand, and especially in heads up. There's so many different ways to play a hand. You have so much more creativity available to you in heads up. In six max, that might be true. Like there could be some spots where you see someone, you know,
Right.
miss a flop c bet in a spot where they just have to bet. You might see them, I don't know, call the river with a hand that's just like literally below the threshold of possible hands that could ever call against anyone. Like there's things you could do in certain game structures that are just bad, but taking that approach with good heads up players, it was pretty foolish,
Right.
Um, so I think my system now would be a lot more about data. It'd be a lot more about looking at the HUD stats, looking at the matchup, just thinking, okay, like are they? Because now I know my own game in and out. Now I know every leak, every perceived leak that I have. I'm aware of it because I've studied my own data.
Hmm.
Um, and I could spot if an opponent matches up well against me. Like I could spot now, like, oh, they're doing that thing that most people don't do, and that loses me money.
Right.
Um, I can see that now, but it requires a full analysis of the game tree.
Right. So I guess that leads me to the next question is it sounds like you're big on statistics, numbers. It sounds like you're more of like a game theory based player than rather an exploitative player, or would you say that you use a lot of the statistics do you make a lot of adjustments? Like let's say you find that number or that stat that looks a bit
Mhm.
off. Are you going to study the adjustment to that and start pushing that on that player? Or are you just going to play that player knowing that they're not doing that enough, so you're just automatically going to make money?
Yeah, I would say I don't know if I like make good on this idea when I'm actually at the table, but I think that the goal for me is to be a theoretical player away from the table and an exploitative player at the table. So
Okay.
so the difference there would be like I think the majority of my study is spent learning what solutions are and um what the equilibrium is for a given spot. Um, but the majority of my effort when I'm playing is in figuring out how I can take advantage of what they're doing wrong.
Okay.
Um, so especially in heads up, I think that was true. I think that the theory is of course important to know because a lot of times you're just not sure like if they're doing something wrong in a given spot. So if you're not sure what they're doing, you just follow theory, right? To the best of your ability. But if you have any indication that they're bluffing too much, you just call. Like, who
Right.
cares?
Yeah.
If you have any indication that they're folding too much, you just bluff. Like, what is it? Like blockers be damned. It doesn't really matter, right? So
Like we
I
need a
think in
T-shirt.
execution, my goal, yeah, my goal in execution is definitely to be an exploitative player.
I was just thinking with like the Nike logo and it says "Just Bluff," you know, that'd be a good one.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I
what
like
is
it.
your? I know you said you're getting into more tournaments now, but I do see that you're still getting in plenty of time online. If I'm not mistaken, playing mostly. Is it mostly tournaments, or are you still
Yeah,
getting in some
yeah,
cash game action?
online or live. Let's say post COVID, I've just played tournaments.
Okay.
There was some mixing of that, like 2019, early 2020. I was mixing maybe some online cash, some live cash into that rotation, but I've more recently decided that it's just better um, for my learning process and for my ability to execute to focus on the one format. So
Right.
that's all I've played a lot of it online and a lot of it live, but I've just been focusing on MTTs.
I think I'm the same way with like having one format to focus on. Early in my career, I was playing 8 game, and
Mhm,
I was always like a specialist at stud and then okay at the others.
mhm.
And it was really difficult to balance being good at every single format. It was almost like if I studied one, I would forget something about the other,
Hmm.
and then I could never retain all of the information at once. Whatever I was most recently
Interesting.
studying was kind of what I was like applying. So that was a
Yeah.
big reason why I kind of switched from 8 game to PLO and then from PLO to No Limit Hold'em. And then now I'm starting to get this like urge to want to play MTTs. I think
Excuse
there's
me.
this natural progression right now that's happening in the online world where we're kind of seeing, okay, cash games are getting tough, right?
Yeah.
Like, where is the softest action we can possibly find? Well, where can we play with like a firefighter, a teacher, like the mailman? Like, what atmosphere can we play with these
Yeah.
people? And it's like an MTT, a tournament. Like, if you go to the World Series of Poker, you're playing with tons and tons of recreational players. So, like, do
Yeah.
you think like that mindset is why maybe you transitioned into MTTs, or what was it that made you stop playing cash games and get into that MTT field?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I think I would be fooling myself to say that seeing the opportunity of, future profits wasn't some of the motivation. I think when I started playing live tournaments more in 2019, I just saw like how healthy that ecosystem is, and I saw a lot of like longevity in that. It just seemed like something because my goal isn't to leave poker. My goal is to find ways to keep myself interested, to keep myself motivated, to keep myself making money. So tournaments seem like the best fit for that. But I also think part of it is like the complexity of the strategy is something that keeps
Yeah.
me like interested in learning the game because I think finding the softest game, like when I stopped playing cash games, it wasn't because I was losing in cash games. I stopped playing cash games because the environment was shifting in a way where I like wasn't motivated to keep fighting or like motivated to keep getting better, or motivated to keep playing, or something was just,
Right.
I don't know. It was when it was all going to apps and all going private and all going into this environment that I just wasn't enjoying. So it was hard for me to keep studying, hard for me to keep playing volume. And in tournaments, I don't have that issue. So I think that the excitement of having like a complicated puzzle to solve is also keeping me really interested in the format.
Yeah. I think we also have a similar mindset in, being turned off by the private games, being turned off by the app games, the invite only kind of game that has been developing a lot in casinos.
Yeah.
And even online at the highest stakes, a lot of these players are just getting poached from into these apps. Whereas
Yeah.
like in 2010, 2009, 2008, maybe if the businessman wanted to go get some online poker in, they would just log on to one of the poker sites. There would be no
Yeah.
private app game that uh, so and so is running that has good kickback or whatever. Like it has really privatized a lot. I don't think a lot of people realize that, and that's probably a lot of why those nosebleed games died as well at the same time. There was a few reasons for that, I'm sure, but that surely didn't help to ever
No.
have like a rail heaven come back again. I
Yeah.
think that these private apps have put the dagger into those games. So I think, yeah, it's a shame, but at the same time, um, I'm kind of in the camp that I want poker to be accessible to everyone. If you want to sit down and play, you can play.
Hmm.
There's no list for, VIPs. There's no this for that. It's like if
Hmm.
you get in the game, you get to play, you get on the list. If your name's called, you go play. And what happened was politics started getting integrated into these games, and I think that turned me off as well. Like it seems like that was not really a good thing for you as well for the heads up cash games. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah,
Yeah. I
I
mean,
can
it's like
understand
you
that
said,
move.
if the way of getting a heads up match, which is just poking the bear on Twitter and until you get a
Yeah,
$1 million challenge, like that's not me. That's not going to happen.
exactly. And like give them a and give them like a big blinds per 100, you know, uh
Yeah. Yeah.
kickback or whatever. Like long gone are the days of like, okay, I'm gonna battle you, you're gonna battle me. That's it. You know,
Yeah.
not setting all these rules and amount of hands and all this and that. You just sit down, you play, and everyone gets to watch.
Hmm.
No shots fired at anyone, by the way. Just I think that's more along the lines of what I would enjoy, and I think a lot of other people would enjoy as well.
Hmm.
So you're mostly playing MTTs now. You've played a ton of cash games in your history.
Hmm.
What does your grind look like? What is your, what is your, let's say you want to play a day of poker. What does that day look like for you? And what is your setup? We'll get to what your setup looks like, but let's first talk about just like what does your grind day look like?
Yeah. I would say, I guess if I'm imagining an online grind day, it's often it's either during a series or it's on a Sunday or the occasional um, Tuesday, Thursday type of session outside of those series. Usually, I try to schedule my start like ahead, like the night before. Like I'll look at the schedule the following day, know kind of roughly when the important tournaments are getting going, so I know what time I need to be ready. Because I like to get at least a few hours of the day in before I'm like sitting down and playing. I don't really um, what do you call it? I'm not, I suppose, not much of a morning person is the way to put it.
Yeah,
So having like a pretty long warm up routine, like not, I don't really have like that fixed of a warm up routine, but I know kind of the important pillars that a lot of people would recommend. Like getting outside for some amount of time, maybe doing a short workout, um, getting lots of fluids. Like this has a notable impact on how clearly I can think. So it's actually really nice um, about tournaments is that you can set your start time for the chunk of tournaments, whatever it is that you want to play. And at least on my time zone, it's pretty reasonable to start, I don't know, anytime between like 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. So that's really favorable for that. And yeah, I mean, once I start playing, like that's my day. I mean, once you start your tournament day, you're locked in.
yeah,
Um, again, like I try not to be making too many decisions on the fly about like how much I'm going to register or what I'm playing. I try to have that predetermined for the most part, and just register everything and let the session play out.
Right.
And I'm yeah, again, like I'm kind of careful about routine. I want to get good sleep, so I also don't typically play very late unless I run deep on ACR. There's not much you can do about ACR schedules. They just run really late and they're really good tournaments. So um, sometimes I'll play late, but oftentimes I'm done by like 9 or 10 p.m. and that gives me time to think about tomorrow and um, mark some hands and kind of properly shut things down.
Right. Do you have like a technical warm up before you start playing? Like, do you review some things, or do you just jump right in?
I have like an ideal one that I don't do that often.
Yeah.
The ideal version is that if there's hands that I've marked from the previous day, then I would. Well, sorry. The first thing I would do is I would finalize my schedule if I haven't already done that the night before, because I don't like to think about that once I'm like into
Right.
hands, into poker mindset. Right, it kind of pulls you out of it. Um, but then I would review yesterday's hands. I would like clear all of the questionable decisions that I might be sleeping on
Right.
out of my mind by reviewing them, and then I would start something with the trainer before I play the actual session. So I would load up. I use Lucid GTO personally, but or I would use Preflop Academy if it was a preflop thing, and just play 15-20 minutes of some training before I get into the session. Even more ideally, the training would be like targeted to some particular thing that I'm trying to improve right now, which I have like a to do list essentially, like a backlog of
Right.
areas to study.
I think we all have
But
one of
really, for
those.
me, it's just yeah, uh, just getting some hands in to kind of speed up my thought process before um, playing for real money is I
Right.
think pretty valuable.
Yeah. So like literally your setup, you have one monitor, two monitors.
I am on one monitor at the moment. It's a 32-inch though, so it's pretty spacious, and I typically only play 9 tables or less, so I find it pretty good, pretty roomy.
Do you tile the tables or cascade or stack?
I tile, yeah. I like to see what's happening when I'm not in the hand.
Right.
I'm not I'm not a cascade per. I used to cascade
Used to
way
cascade.
back.
Okay.
Yeah,
I feel like that's
I
like the
mean
hardest to manage.
I used to the I say this as if I was like playing all those tables. When I used to play more heads up, I would have like empty tables, empty tables, empty tables, and I
Right.
had to kind of know what they all were and where they. So the cascade was nice to see like the 6 different sites
Okay,
all
yeah.
separated. Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah, I don't know, I always find it interesting. I still have yet to find someone who primarily grinds as a stacked or cascaded player. Like
Hmm.
it's I feel like there's an inherent advantage in just doing tile because you can see, like you said, all the action that's happening on all the other
Yeah.
tables and sites like that.
Yeah.
And do you run it once or twice if you have the option?
Um, by default, once. Uh, well, I think that's true. Yeah, that was something I used to leave it on toggle, and I would take it off against short stackers. I would take it off against most recreationals. Um, I prefer to run it once against the players who I don't want to play against for a long time, if that makes sense. Like running it twice increases the chance that you have to keep playing that person. So I would prefer to run it once against anyone. I don't want that to be the case. But I've certainly run it twice in some like bigger games against other regs because that's fine. Like I don't mind reducing variance for free.
All right, that was a trick question. You're supposed to say run it once since you're working for run it once right now. But
Yeah,
anyway.
but that was like a I. It's been a while since I thought about that because that was like I thought that was really clever when I first came up with it, and because I
Yeah.
wasn't seeing other people do it, I was seeing people like run it twice against Rex who had 8 big blinds left on the table, and I was like, What are you doing? Like, there's no way this is the right play." But you're just not thinking about it.
Okay. So I mean, as far as I know, running it once or twice is only going to change variance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, I guess you're increasing the chance of them stacking off to you. Is that the idea, or?
Well, it's just like if you run it twice, you present the opportunity that the same scenario you're currently playing could continue to happen. So you've introduced a third option, which is chopping.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're currently on like 8 big blinds and everyone else is 100,
Right.
you're maintaining the possibility of them being 8 big blinds and everyone else is 100, which is like you would prefer them to have 0 or 16, right? Like 0 and 16 are both better than 8.
Okay. Yeah.
So so my idea was you don't want that third option to be
Right.
introduced.
Do you think there's
Yeah.
any kind of like mental aspect of running it once and twice? Like, do you think like I don't know. There's a lot of players at 500 Zoom that I know run it once, and I hate when they
Yeah.
do it because I'm trying to reduce variance myself.
Yeah.
But maybe like, is there a reason to do that against the
I've heard that
population?
argument. I've heard people say like I think my mental game's stronger and they're more likely to tilt, so why not increase the variance? I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Um I don't know how often that's true, but I think it's fair.
Okay. Yeah. And so I have one last question before we wrap things up for you. What does online poker mean to you now?
Well, yeah, I mean now it's complicated. um
Relationship is
I mean
complicated.
I know, right? Like the online poker of the past is like super important to me, right? That was my career, and that's like the reason we're talking today. I as it exists right now, it's complicated because it presents like a lot of um, there's more of like the dangerous stuff. There's more of like having to protect against this and having to protect against that, and feels like I'm constantly fielding questions about like RTA and getting super used and like vulnerable programs and all this stuff, and it's just like I don't want to think
Right.
about this. Like I want to play a game.
Yeah.
Um, so I it the version of it that is safe and like that I can just sit down and play, like it's great. Um, it's been like the most valuable thing to my career, but yeah, let's say it's complicated because I'm just starting to like that there's a game out there in the casino that just feels a lot safer and feels a lot more sustainable and is probably where I'm going to be devoting more time as things move forward. Unfortunately.
Okay. So you think you're going to transitioning out of online poker slowly to online poker because of all of the kind of RTA and cheating and
I
rampant
mean,
stuff going
I
on?
would love I would love for there to be a big enough push in the other direction that I don't feel the need to do that.
Right.
Um,
And by that you mean
on
like
top, I mean,
sites solving the issues or
yeah, but it just like if I'm being realistic, I don't see like what the solution is. I think there's measures um to curb cheating that can still be added on.
okay.
Um, but using assistance tools online is just it's just pretty easy. And the tools are pretty good.
Right.
So it's a tough battle to win, I guess, is the way that I see it. Um, I would love to keep playing online. The amount that I'm playing online now is still pretty comfortable to me. Um, if tournaments continue to be big and if series continue to put up the kind of numbers that they're putting up, then I'm really not that concerned about this relatively small number of cheaters that might be in the game.
Mhm.
So if it stays that way, like great, then online poker is like I think of it more like I tell a lot of my students this too. Like it's a training ground. It's like it's battle testing, right? It's the toughest version of the game that you're going to get. So it's just like amazing experience to be able to play
Right.
online, and it's from the convenience of your own home. So like what what else could you ask for, right? I mean, it's pretty sweet. It's still a very fun game that I hope to be able to keep playing.
So then what did online poker mean to you back in the glory days when we weren't talking about RTA and stuff like that? You know, like what was that kind of feeling of being in there battling, having it be most of the time that you spent on this game? Because that's, I think, the kind of memory that a
Mhm.
lot of us really enjoyed and loved and want to continue bringing forward.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean that's my, I guess, memory of like independence, of of being a self-sustaining person essentially, and just like kind of living the way that I would like to live. Incredible. I mean, I get teased all the time about it, never having held down a real job, which is like great. Like that's perfect. Um, and that's because of the old online poker, right? So uh, yeah, I think that's the memory that sits in my mind with online poker, is just like the ability to do anything, the ability to work for yourself, the ability to be independent.
Right. Great. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap up, or anything that you would like to plug? Any coaching sites maybe that you'd like to direct people towards?
Yeah. So I have a course coming out with Run It Once in approximately 2 weeks. I don't know at what time this will be on YouTube, so maybe it'll be even less than that
Very
by then.
shortly.
But September 12th, I have a course coming out with Run It Once. I'm still producing content with Run It Once on the regular. So, although I think it's been a couple months since my last video, but I promise there's more regular content coming soon. And I do have coaching as well. It's just my full name.com, kevinrabichow.com. You can see any info there on my coaching business. Um, Thanks for this.
Yeah.
This was a fun chat.
Yeah. It was really great having you on and really appreciate your time. And thank you.